So after learning comparison of like fractions, let's learn about comparison of unlike fractions. So the diagram that we used in the video lecture on like and unlike fractions, so for this was for the unlike fraction one, we are going to use the same diagram. And those of you who haven't watched video on like and unlike fractions and comparison of like fractions, please watch those videos so that you can have a better understanding what we will discuss here. So this was a diagram. We have two same blocks that is of same length, rectangular block. This block has been divided into 6 equal parts. This block has been divided into 13 equal parts. The shaded portion represented by these three portions in this block will be 3 by 6, and the shaded portions represented in this block will be the fraction represented by these 5 shaded portions will be 5 by 13. Denominator is different, that makes it unlike fraction because this has been divided into 6 equal parts and this has been divided into 13 equal parts, and therefore these two fractions are unlike fractions. Okay, if I ask you that hey, if this block has been divided into 6 equal parts and this block has been divided into 13 equal parts, which block will have a greater, if I have to compare a single portion like this, a single portion of this one and a single portion of this one, which one will be the greater one? You will say that hey, this block has been divided into 6 parts and this block has been divided into 13 parts. Of course, that's a common sense. This single block will be smaller, this single block will be smaller, and this single block will be larger. Why? Because it has been divided into 6 parts only and it has been divided into 13 parts. So the more number of parts you divide a block, the smaller a single block will become. That's a common sense. Fair enough. So if these two fractions, if these two fractions, like in this case it's 3 by 6 and in this case 5 by 3, if I remove these two portions, like if I remove these two portions, okay, now I make it 3 by 13. Now I make it 3 by 13. The shaded portions of fractions represented by these three shaded portions. This fraction is fraction represented by these three shaded portions. Okay. Now if I ask you, can you compare this one? You will say that hey, these two fractions are unlike fractions, but what we can see here, the numerator in both these two fractions are actually equal. Okay, if numerator is equal and if I suppose that this block was divided into 6 blocks, and if I look at this fraction and I assume that this block has been divided into 13 equal portions, then of course this 3 represents the 3 shaded portion of this one and this 3 represents the 3 shaded portions of this one. Which 3 shaded portion will occupy the larger space? We will say that this one. Why? Because single block of this one is larger than single block of this one. Therefore, if I add 3 blocks of this one, that will be larger than the 3 blocks of this one. Right? 3 blocks of this one will be larger than the 3 blocks of this one because a single block of this one is larger than the single block of this one. Therefore, 3 blocks of this one will be larger than 3 blocks of this one. That makes this fraction greater than this one. So what's the point? If in unlike fractions you have same numerator, that is numerator is equal, then the fraction which will have a smaller denominator, that will be the larger fraction. In this case, 3 by 6 is a larger fraction. Now it was easy for you, to imagine this diagram and then tell. What if it would have been, let's say, 2001 by 3000 and 2001 by 4000. Again, numerator in this one is 2001 and in this one is also 2001. You can think this one of as a block has been divided into 3000 blocks. Just imagine this block and assume that this block has been divided into 3000 equal parts. Okay, this block has been divided into 4000 equal parts. This has been divided into 3000. This block has been divided into 4000 equal parts. Which block will have a single, if I consider the single block of this block and a single portion of this block and single portion of this block, which one will be greater? Remember, this block has been divided into 4000 equal parts and this block has been divided into 3000 equal parts. So if I talk about a single block, which one will be greater? You will say that, hey, of course, this one. Why? Because as we go on increasing the number of equal parts, if this is 4000, let's say if I take another block and if I take another block and if I divide 5000 equal parts, okay, so single portion will become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as we go on increasing number of parts. So a single block in this one, that is 3001, will be the greater than the single portion of the block which will have 4000 equal parts. That makes this fraction greater than this fraction. Why? Because in this case denominator is smaller than this one. That makes this fraction greater. Therefore this fraction will be greater than this one. Let's take one more example. Let's say that we have 5000 divided by 10,000 and we have 5000 divided by 11,000. Okay, if I ask you which one will be, these two fractions are of course unlike fractions. Why? Because denominator is different. If denominator is different, that makes two fractions unlike fractions. But in this case you can notice that, first look at the numerator. In unlike fractions, numerator is same. Instantly this diagram should come into your mind and you should think of this fraction as a block which has been divided into 10,000 equal parts. Okay, assume that this fraction represents a block which has been divided into 10,000 equal parts, and assume this fraction as a block which has been divided into 11,000 equal parts. So as we discussed earlier, if we go on increasing the number of equal parts, that will make the space occupied by a single block smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, on that basis we can say that again in this case, since this is 5000 and since this is also 5000, but since the numerator of this one is smaller and the denominator of this one is smaller than this one, that makes this fraction larger. Why? Because this fraction represents 5000 equal portions out of 10,000, but it's telling you 5000 equal portions out of 11,000. Of course, 5000 portions of this one will be greater than the 5000 portions of this one. So that's a basic thing, right? What you have to do is, if you find out that fractions are unlike, that is denominator is different, look at their numerator. If their numerator is equal, then you will apply this method. So whatever we discussed here, the condition is that your numerator should be equal. Your numerator should be equal. So not this one. Your numerator should be equal. So if your numerator is equal, then you can assume this diagram into your mind and brain, and then just think of the divisions in a fashion we discussed here, and on the basis of that you can calculate. But what if your numerator is not equal? What if the fraction that you are discussing, let's say that it is let's say if this would not have been 5,000, if it was, let's say if it is 6,000, this is 6,000 by 10,000 and this is 5,000 by 11,000. Again, these two fractions are unlike fractions, but in this case here numerator is also different. In this case numerator is 6,000 and in this case 5,000. Then how will you compare? So for the second case of comparison of unlike fractions, that is when your numerator is not equal, when your numerators are not equal. In that case, what we will do? We will discuss that portion in the next video, this one. So this was the condition when your numerators are equal. When your numerators are equal, if your numerators are equal, look at the denominator, and the fraction which has the smallest denominator, that fraction will be the greater one. Okay. See you in the next video.